Why is it so hard to finish your mixes? I got this comment on the channel recently. It said, "I'd like to see a video on how to overcome perfectionism. I waste so much time trying to get something right instead of actually enjoying the process of making music." This is not uncommon at all. I've got this question quite a lot. And even inside my paid program, we had to set a limit on the number of times our students could submit the same song for mix feedback, because it really does not serve you to be working on the same mix for 3 weeks at a time. Now, from all the comments and students and conversations I've had over the past 8 years, I'm pretty confident to say that most people spend anywhere from a few days to a few weeks trying to finish a mix on one song. And some people even tell me they've been sitting on mixes for months or even years because they just can't commit and call it done. Now, people might kind of laugh at themselves about this, but if you're taking this craft seriously at all, it's actually a big problem and has a pretty negative impact. Now, for one thing, you're simply not going to improve very much if you're stuck working on the same material for weeks at a time. Imagine there are 2 engineers starting out at the same skill level. The first person spends 1 month on every mix. The other person forces himself to finish a mix every week, which is still too slow, but easy comparison here. Now, in the short term, the person spending 1 month on their mix might get better results, but after a year, the person who's done 52 mixes instead of 12 is going to be a better mixer. And then there's a professional cost. If you want to mix and produce for clients and get paid for it, even just a bit on the side, you need to finish projects because no one wants to hire you and wait a month to get a mix back. And if you really want to compete at a high level, you've got to be able to approach the industry standard, which I would say is about 1 mix per day. So whether you realize it or not, it's costing you quite a bit to not be able to finish mixes. Time is slipping away. That's the only thing that we can't get back. So I want to give you some tips on how to overcome this problem because there are some practical things that you can do. But first, we need to actually make sure we understand why you have this problem in the first place. So the guy who made this comment diagnosed the problem as perfectionism. But is that really the problem? Because I'd argue it's not. And maybe labeling it perfectionism is kind of sugarcoating things, and it's really the surface symptom of some deeper problems. So here's what I believe are actually the root issues. First, it's a lack of a clear outcome. Fuzzy targets don't get hit. So do you actually know what you're aiming for when you start a mix? What criteria are you going to judge it by? And why? What's your reason for mixing this song? Is there anything at stake? Is anyone depending on you? Is anything bad going to happen if you don't finish it? Another huge problem is lack of confidence. But most people have this wrong because they believe confidence is just a feeling that you can manufacture. The world tells you just be confident, just feel confident in yourself. But that's kind of impossible because confidence comes from skills and from knowledge. You don't just manufacture it. You actually have to gain confidence by being good at something. So if you've got knowledge gaps and missing pieces of understanding, then your lack of confidence isn't the problem, it's just the symptom. The problem is lack of knowledge. And then there's our modern problem of information overwhelm and option paralysis. There's an endless sea of techniques and tutorials and teachers and plugins and presets. No wonder it's hard to finish a mix. Like, how do you actually get to the point where you firmly say, no, I'm not going to change this anymore, when it feels like just watching one more video or trying one more plugin might be the thing to make it better? Then you throw in most people's total inability to actually focus and do deep work for an extended period of time, thanks to our phones and social media. And then, of course, there's plain old fear. Fear of failure, fear of being judged, fear of being embarrassed and exposed for how much you really suck. And to make things all worse, on top of this, it's all wrapped up in isolation. Most people are doing this completely alone, and that works like a negative multiplier on all of these other problems. All right, so that's a lot of problems. I'm sorry, but now that these problems are actually laid out, it's not just this fuzzy statement of how do I overcome perfectionism or how do I finish more mixes? There are actually some concrete things we can do to start knocking down all of these barriers. Now, the first one is that you need to set a clear goal and have a reason to hit it. Put yourself on the line. For me, when I book a project with a band, I commit to a specific date when I will send them a mix. And I have a reason to hit that deadline because I gave them my word and I don't want my reputation to suffer. Now, if you don't have clients and you're doing this for yourself, then you need to find some other ways to get that outside accountability. So you could announce your release date to your friends and followers. You could book a mastering date before you even start the project. You could join a coaching program where you actually submit your work and mentors are going to expect to hear something from you. Whatever it is, ultimately, you have to take your word seriously and realize that when you don't follow through on what you said you would do, it's not only chipping away at your reputation and your success, it's chipping away at your character and how you see yourself. The less you follow through, the less likely you're going to be to follow through. So connect with some reason why and with a negative consequence of not doing it. Okay, now how about overcoming the lack of confidence? Well, again, that's just a disguise for lack of knowledge. So start filling in those knowledge gaps. And I'm not talking about more YouTube binges. Now, once again, get committed for real. Put some skin in the game, pay for some training, pay for mentorship and coaching, and then ignore everything else. And that's also gonna eliminate the information overload problem at the same time. And because you've actually invested in something, it gives you a reason to follow through. Plus, you're actually gonna learn a lot more because you can get the full picture from one source and not try to piece together different scraps from 20 different sources. If that was working, you would already be good. Next, you probably need to simplify and limit your choices of tools and plugins. So if there are plugins installed on your DAW that you barely use, just delete them or move them to the unused folder. Make it so your eyes actually see less options. You take away that temptation to try that next plugin just in case. Unsubscribe from mailing lists from plugin companies. Just narrow down your options to have a few of your most used tools. Then start burning the ships. That means committing to sounds and committing to tones as you go. And I think a lot of people get stuck at mix time because they've actually delayed every single decision until then. They're choosing takes, they're choosing tones. Stop doing that. Have some courage, make some decisions, and commit as you go. You shouldn't have live drum triggers and live amp sims and virtual instruments all running in your mix session, because that, again, creates a temptation to always go back and swap out the drum sound, swap out the synth sound, change the guitar amp. So I recommend that before you start mixing, and ideally way before that, like during the production phase, you should commit to those sounds and tones and bounce them down so that when it's time to mix, you're just working with audio tracks. Next, manage your tech. Stop letting it run your life. So turn off your internet when you're mixing. Put your phone away. Delete social media apps from your phone. I am a huge believer in doing deep work, which is only possible when you're not interrupted every 5 minutes. So what might be taking you 5 hours to do right now might actually only take you 1 or 2 if you simply cut out all of these useless distractions and interruptions. All right, now we come to the big one, which is fear. Now, even if you do all of these things, you're still going to be afraid of sucking, afraid of being judged. Well, the only way to overcome fear is simply to take action anyway. That's called courage. It's the same thing that you would tell your kids if they're afraid to step outside of their comfort zone. Now, stuff is only scary when we haven't done it before. But once you do it, you realize it actually wasn't that big of a deal after all. Even 2 weeks later, if you hate your mix or no one listens to your song, well, so what? Nothing really bad happened to you, and at least you've got some forward momentum. You can just try again, and it's going to be less scary that next time. The fact is, whether you start now or you wait 3 more years to actually finish stuff and get it out there, you're probably going to suck at first anyways. So why not get it over with as quickly as possible? Now, remember I said isolation is a negative multiplier on all of those problems. So let's wrap it all up with collaboration instead. Working with other people, it's going to make a positive impact on all of these areas. You're going to learn faster. You'll avoid getting obsessed over things that don't really matter. You'll be accountable to someone, and you'll feel less afraid because you're sharing the risk and you're in it together. It also happens to be a lot more fun and rewarding when you connect with real people. Go figure. So that's how I would break down the problem of not being able to finish mixes. You have to dig a little deeper under the surface, but once you do, you can discover that all of these little problems are things you can actually do something about. And I want you to get unstuck. I want you to get more music out there into the world this year and move your career or passion forward. And I think if you start putting some of these things into practice, you will. And hey, if you want to go a little deeper in the weeds with me and learn how to simplify your mix process itself, go ahead and check out this video next.